right, so our panel is, as you can see, sports betting in the media world. Very quick introductions up here, although you have the pictures there, so you can probably tell, but the bios are online. We have Chad Millman, who is the head of media at the Action Network. We have Matt Drew, who is an executive vice president at Perform and DAZN. DAZN?
Perform, but yeah, Perform is the owner of DAZN, so both, yes.
And John Levy, who is CEO of theScore. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about you know, the market for gambling, and the market for gambling since a Supreme Court decision. You've come out with a bunch of new content. Like, in the immediate future, like right now, what does that decision mean for content?
Well, it's massive. I mean, you know, I left ESPN in September of 2017 and started the Action Network, and I'd say for the first 8 or 9 months, it was a lot of proselytizing, a lot of trying to explain to people what we're doing and how we're trying to cover the betting space and the kind of content we're creating and recruiting and launching podcasts or getting writers on our platform and trying to figure out where we could sort of live in a linear and video space. And there were a lot of people who sort of understood that sports betting was something that engages a much broader audience and that there's a huge parallel conversation that's happening around sports betting and wanted to be in the space, and we're excited to sort of talk to people who are going to be sort of obsessive and focused on that. And then the decision happened, and it just accelerated every conversation because all of a sudden, and I'm sure these guys can speak to that too, like people are realizing, all right, it really is coming, and maybe they had been thinking, we'll manage it when we need to manage it, and now they need to manage it.
What confuses me is that there's what you're doing now is, you know, you have a show on ESPN Plus, a streaming platform, where you sort of go over the, you know, the lines of the day.
Sure.
Why couldn't you have done that before the decision? What was it about this decision that made you do that? Because that's a show people would have watched, I would think.
Sure, but very much to ESPN's credit, we started talking about that show, and they started planning for this, for what Plus was going to be in its launch in the spring, in the winter. And the timing was such that the show launched, you know, I think 3 weeks after the decision. But honestly, we could have launched on, I think Plus launched in early April. We could have launched in early April. If not for, you know, logistics on, we hadn't signed the contract yet, and, you know, things like that.
Simple little things.
You know, simple things like that. But, like, the planning for that show had been going on long before the decision, and very much to ESPN's credit, they were thinking about how can we sort of be aggressive in this space with a new product where we know an audience might find, where we might be able to find sort of that niche audience that wants to subscribe and wants to be engaged with this kind of content.
I think that actually probably leads on to the wider context here, which is what's happened here in the United States is obviously fascinating and has created a focus on this particular issue, but it's reflective of what's going on more globally. Now, I mean, the panel here is sports betting in the media world. It's not specific to the US, and I think that's important because there is a change in what's going on in the betting and gaming industry generally. It is moving more towards, you know, being an engagement function. You know, the leagues were just on here. They will undoubtedly have talked about engagement. And you're moving towards a world where it's a more developed type of product set that's being pushed out there, the sorts of things that these gents in particular are doing. And you're seeing that in everything from the nature of the data, which is being collected and utilized to power some of these new markets that are evolving. It's not just necessarily basic score data. It is much more evolved data sets with you know, event data and tracking data and some biometrics and so on and so forth, lots of analytics used in that. The space is evolving, and it's evolving to meet the need of a new type of fan, which exists in the media industry generally. We all know the need for people to engage with the younger generations. This is a means of doing it. What's happening in the United States is part of that. You know, the market here has opened up. I think one of the drivers for that was daily fantasy. Daily fantasy is an indicative piece of the wider change, you know, a more involved type of betting and a product which exists. And I think what's going to happen in the US initially is there's going to be a kind of additive benefit of a new market existing on a similar means as a kind of pure betting play. But over time, it's going to evolve into what I think each of us on this stage here want it to be, which is something which is a highly developed product based on high-quality content, data content, streaming content, interactive, inclusive of integrated data and video experiences, shows such as the one that the Action Network have with ESPN, content and products such as what the guys at theScore are doing. And that's very much the future, but it's the future globally. I think what's happening in the US will be a catalyst for further change. But fundamentally, I think that's the parameter of this conversation. It's, how do we get to that point, and what does it look like when we get there?
Matt, you're from London. London, it's...
Well spotted.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
London, it's all legal over there.
Not everything, but...
True enough. Was there a content revolution around gambling?
It's ongoing, and that's the basis of what I'm saying here. I think we've seen it over the last 18 months. I mean, Perform is a business which is we're a digital sports business across the board. We have a betting content provision business. We're not a betting services provider. We provide content. We have a data business, an editorial business. We're a broadcaster, obviously, with DAZN. We're a distributor for media rights and broadcast rights for our agency business. And of course, we have portals and so on. We're touching 150 million plus people a month on those platforms, streaming 70 million hours of content. Lots of touch points with fans. This revolution is happening across all of that. In betting, in the regulated market in the rest of the world, it has already begun. The last 18 months, 2 years, we have 2 data sets which we collect predominantly. One is a running ball product, which is fast betting data, basic data delivered super quick. The other one is Opta data, which is a kind of world-renowned event, deep, rich data brand. Traditionally, they've been divided into betting and media. Opta for media, running ball for betting. Increasingly, those lines are blurring. They're coming together. Betting operators want deeper data. They want Opta data. They're integrating it into their solutions. The question of what a betting operator is evolving. Media properties are coming into that space. So to answer your question, yes, in London, in the rest of the world, in other regulated markets, this is what's happening. It is going to happen here. There's a lot of legislative issues to sort out, of course. It's going to take a little bit of time. It might be somewhat piecemeal, but the direction of travel is very clear.
John is taking so many notes, I feel like he's come up with a new business. Wow. We're sitting here.
On which note?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
You're going to filibuster now, right, John?
First of all, I just want to say, it is a freaking great time to be alive.
Because of this.
Because of this. Well, it's a great time to be alive, period, but particularly because of this. Think about what we've been doing over the last 5, 10, 20 years in anticipation of this. All of this, right? You in the UK, you here with your history at ESPN, and we can talk about that later too, but particularly what you're doing now, and you just got to love the U.S. Supreme Court to just sort of boom. It's not much I can say. I don't want to get into politics, but I love the Supreme Court and the decision that they made. And if you look at it from a bunch of perspectives, like let's just take theScore. So everybody hopefully knows what theScore is. We're one of the most popular sports apps in North America. We got a hugely engaged user base. We know this user base gambles for sure. They've been doing it for a lot of years. And now we have the opportunity to further the engagement by participating in one form or another, and we can talk about that later, how that's going to roll out. From an industry perspective, look, I mean, I know this is going to be messy, for sure. It's state by state. We're talking about some states are going to go and tag it to brick and mortar or racinos or casinos. Other states are going to go into the mobile space, which, by the way, is where it's all going to end up. I think the question coming later is what's short-term or long-term. Long-term gaming and gambling is going to be a product of what you do on your mobile device. And it probably will be on a national basis at some point, whether it's cross-state allowed or whether there's some sort of national regulation that allows it. In the short term, we've got a lot of stuff that we got to deal with. Third perspective, the user. The bettor can finally come out of the closet in the U.S. It's amazing, Look at the hoops he's had to go through to figure out a way to make a bet, or and how do you get crapped on by everybody because it was gray market or illegal. It's been going on. The market is huge. So the big winner is going to be the bettor. And then From my own personal perspective, I mean, this is something I've been dreaming about ever since I was 10 years old, answering the phone on Sunday mornings when I used to get this call and go, "Is your dad there?" You know who it was? It was Red the Bookie. So the bets would come in, and I'd sit with my dad all afternoon. We'd be watching NFL, and we'd have a great time. So that was one revelation when I knew it was going to happen. 10 years. The next one was a little older. I walked into a casino in Vegas, and I think it was Caesars. It was one of the first magnificent sports books, right? That big round area with screens all over the place, and data and horse racing and all this sort of stuff. I don't think I was 21, but I took my $22, 20 plus 10%, up to the window, and I bet on, I can't remember what it was, some game. So I gave the guy the money. He gave me the ticket, and I said, "God, this is civilized. Look how easy this is. You know, how can this not be open in the rest of the country? How can this not be happening?" So I think this is a huge win for all of us. It's a huge opportunity. I think it's going to dramatically change over the course of time. I know we're talking about short-term and long-term. This is clearly going to be an evolution, but from our perspective, I think it's going to open up opportunities that not even us sitting here today would really appreciate and understand.
You mentioned, can I ask you a question?
Go right ahead.
Well, actually, you said something really interesting, which is like the third component of that is the better, and sort of living out of the. When we talk at Action Network, we're always talking about how we're trying to create that safe space for all these people who have been having conversations in disparate touch points for all these years, and knew there were like-minded people who want to talk about sort of the game last night entirely through the lens of betting,
right,
and haven't been able to find where they could do that other than sort of snippets and sort of their feeds on Twitter. To me, obviously, we're kindred spirits.
Right. Well, they were able to do it on theScore in Canada on the TV network, actually. And, you know, I'm quite proud of that because, you know, we counter-programmed against. I mean, originally when we had our TV network before, you know, how we incubated the app, but our TV network had a ticker on it. It was started in 1995, and the ticker had the odds on it. Well, that was number one, and the ticker never went away. But our hosts were also guys that would never get a job on our version of ESPN, which was TSN. Actually, ESPN owned part of it. You know, our guys were never buttoned down, you know, sort of talking to the audience like they're the authority. Our guys were like the guys you went out drinking with. And you know, it happens to this day. When we're watching a game and the spread goes over, like if the over is like 14 or 15 points in an NFL game, and everybody's asleep except the people who've got a bet on the game, which is like 80% of the people who are watching it. And then it goes over with a field goal in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go. And if you're watching ESPN, and historically, or TSN, sorry, and, you know, so they go, "Well, that was interesting," you know. My guys are sitting there pulling their hair out because they just blew $200. So that was kind of the authenticity that I think is always been there and that now is going to flourish. And, I think it's also going to create huge opportunities because the betting market is, you know, you think about hardcore bettors, medium, there's a whole social side of this thing, you know, that's going to open up. And we just have to figure out how we want to do it and how we feed it and just be attentive, you know, listen to the customer.
I completely agree. And I think that's the challenge in many ways. The scope of what this is about is how do you get to that point? You know, it's been a very quirky set of circumstances in the US around betting. You know, there has been some element of stigma about it, and that can and will change. The question is, how do you go about building a process whereby you actually arrive at that point where the consumer, the bettor, is getting a quality product? It's supposed to be fun, right? A fun product which is engaging and entertaining to be part of. There's no stigma attached to it, and people can participate freely in it. You know, interact across different portals and mediums, you know, on broadcasts, on mobile, and so on. And I think for the US at the moment, that's the challenge. I mean, the panel before us was talking about official data and how that's going to work and what is the role of the league here. Obviously, at state level, at federal level, however that process is going to go, is that's going to be very, very complicated. The thing that makes me slightly optimistic is that I think the incentives are broadly the same for everyone in terms of what the end goal should be. There are smaller negotiations and fundamental negotiations going on as between the betting industry and the leagues, as we all know. But if we take a look beyond that and how this is going to grow, I think everyone has the same aspiration and goal. Because the leagues clearly want to build this into something which allows them to connect directly with their fans.
Sure.
What you guys are doing, what we at Perform will try and do, is build a means to achieve that. And then obviously in the operator sphere, that's something which is beneficial to them because it grows their market. So I have a degree of optimism about where we'll end up. I think it's going to be a challenging road, I think, as we were referring to before. But where we're going to get to, I think, is clear. The question, as you said, what do we need to do to get there in the first place? What model do we need to build? What does the value chain look like? How do you get to a point where quality content that is being created is being distributed in the correct way such that you create an innovative market and you allow people to thrive and to come up with these products that are going to serve the customer in that way?
So you talked about everything's going mobile. This is a two-part question I'm just going to throw out there. What's our timetable for when this is going to be a mature market? And in terms of it going mobile, this is a content panel. What are we going to be doing on mobile beyond just sort of actually betting? I mean, how are you going to program around that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, John. Let me bring out my phone and I'll pass it around and everyone can take a look at the Action app. I think, for us, obviously... You're going to
give me the $20 now?
Yeah, exactly right. We have an app, and our app was predicated on bet tracking, like being able to put in the same way there's sort of a lot of financial services apps where you can get all of your financial information in one place, and it helps you budget and manage and all that kind of stuff. So the foundation for what we're doing is sort of bet tracking, and you can put in your bets, and you see how you're doing over the course of time, and there's some AI built in there that tells you, okay, you're kind of trending in a bad direction on this, and you might want to think about betting overs in baseball instead of unders because you're getting killed in unders, and you might want to think about spending this much on a bet instead of this much on a bet. And so that's a foundation, but it's also about how can you do some of the stuff that Matt was just talking about? How can you do some of the stuff that John is talking about, where you do get to engage and be playful and be fun and be more social and get engaged with the community that is doing more than just hardcore betting. They are people who want to have a conversation about this. How can you follow your friends and what they're betting on? How can you do all these things that sort of make it feel bigger and more fun and sort of broaden the scope of what we're trying to talk about here?
And that comes down to product. You have to create a market where those kind of products are being developed. Take advantage of the convergence which is ongoing between the different data sets I mentioned before. The great streaming capability that exists, with DAZN for us, but also with what other people are doing, with what the leagues themselves are doing with their own products. With broadcast, as you mentioned before, there's a wealth of opportunity there. But in order to get there, I think a slightly different path needs to be taken over here than perhaps has been taken in the rest of the world, where historically there has been a regulated betting market, but it's been what I would describe as a kind of pure play betting market. If we're going to get to this brave new world, you have to structure it slightly differently, from a regulatory point of view, but also commercially. You have to get to the point where content is being created by companies, organizations, which is the ingredient for those products, and it's being distributed across the entirety of the industry to multiple people who are going to take that video, that data, that editorial, and they're going to form and create products around it and then distribute those and create a market, and we'll see what works. To your point, what's it going to look like? We don't know yet. We know what the ingredients are. We don't know what the end result is going to be. But it's pretty clear that there's a lot of innovation that can take place in the space. And certainly from a Perform point of view, our concern and our aspiration is to be able to take what we do as a partner of many leagues across the world from a data collection point of view and a content creation point of view, and then push that out through our licensing business into the market, to these guys and others, and come up with things which are exciting, new, and different in the US, and then see the capacity and the capability for those to spread globally.
Just to sort of carry on to that, because I think actually listening to you, it's kind of mirroring kind of our approach to how we're going to introduce it. And, betting's been around forever. I mean, there's some great betting apps in the UK, and Will Hill, Bet365. I mean, I lose on all of them. It's great. So, but they're betting apps. They're betting apps, and they're great. They're transactional performing apps, right? And they're very effective. And what you can see with some of those apps now is they're trying to bring sort of content into it to create a sticky factor, because right now with the hardcore bettors, it's all about what's the pricing and where do I get my best deal and who's handling my action best and all this sort of stuff, and but it is really transactional. And I think here in the U.S. and in Canada later, I presume, we really have the opportunity, as you're saying, to rethink that model, and that's what we do every day, and that's what we've been doing for the last year. It's how to integrate that transactional activity, because that's really what betting is. It's only one form of how people engage in sports. That's how we look at it. There's a passion for sports that supersedes everything, and you express it in certain ways, and other people, they go to games, they go to bars, they get drunk, they play fantasy, they bet on sports, they bet with their buddies, they trash talk their buddies, they fight over it. I mean, it's a million
You
different...
think just about every vice there is. That's
right, right. But that's how that's why sports is so important. That's why it's so passionate, and betting is a part of it. But it's just a part of it. And if you think about it like that, and you think about, okay, so how do I integrate that into the other forms of engagement? Then I think we really are starting to get at that key. And, that's what you're doing in your articles and how you write about stuff, and you're normalizing it. And similar to how we're thinking about it, which is, you take the next step, and instead of just talking about the environment, you allow the environment to happen inside of you. And I think it's really exciting. And part of the reason I think we get the opportunity to do it here, as compared to your home market, is because they've been doing it for so long. 100%. I mean, look at the experience in Vegas, for example, and look what's going to happen in the States, right? In the States, betting is going to be tied, as it was in Vegas originally, to you had to open an account at a casino. And then there were kiosks, and then you were allowed to do it on a mobile device, but the mobile device actually had to be in the casino originally. It was ridiculous, right? Now there's 3 licensees in Vegas, and you can be anywhere in Nevada. And look what's happening. In-game wagering is almost 40 to 50% of every bet made in Nevada now is on in-game wagering. And it's because the technology is there and getting to the point about houses are going to look in 2 years, 5 years. That's why I think it's all going to be mobile driven. So I think we really have an opportunity to get creative here, think differently. It's not about sort of what do they call them, the turf accountants in the UK, right? The Will Hill, the places where it was smoky and you walk in and you make a bet. It's come a long way from that.
Yeah, and as I said before, that's something that's changed a huge amount in recent years in the UK and elsewhere. It's not representative of what this market actually is at this point. I would just add, to the point before about what this brave new world is going to be. It's coming clearly. It's supplementary and sits alongside the traditional betting which exists. Right. One of the positive things, which everyone knows about what's happening in the US now, is that traditional betting is going to happen in a much more secure and proper framework and regulated environment. The pure play betting will of course still exist. I think it will move increasingly towards a quality of product, even on that base transactional level. So people who are providing quality inputs, people who are running quality markets, people who are running their business in a consumer-friendly way will thrive. The other element which has existed in some parts of the world where it's purely a volume play, pretty low quality content, I think that will fall away. This is going to become a much more premium market in the US and the rest of the world, without question. And that, again, the direction of travel there is obvious. And then what obviously that allows is that supplementary to that, you get this second wave, the new wave of betting for this new breed of fan who wants to come in and be involved in gamification, different types of betting. And as I said before, the incentive for everyone there is clear. It benefits everyone if that's taking place.
Just to be clear, though, I want the old school bettors too, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
he's very greedy.
I'm not dissing the hardcore guys, and quite frankly, you want to be careful not to piss them off because you have to price, you have to have the right product, because if not, and this gets to one thing that is a bit of a concern, I think, and is, as somebody said negotiating and who's going to get what and all this. Well, we can't kill the goose that laid the golden egg here. You hear about the league's position. I didn't hear the previous panel, but you hear the leagues positioning themselves in terms of, what are they entitled to? And this is all going to be regulated, licensed, and taxed. But at the end of the day, the bettor has to have a fair deal. Because if not, he's going to find the fair deal And he's going to continue to do what he's doing today, which is go where he has to go to get a fair bet.
Benny the bookie, that was his name?
Well,
he's not going out of business.
It's more like they'll continue to bet offshore.
Or offshore. I mean, that's the big risk that everybody's excited and everybody's got their hands out and blah, blah, blah. The margins aren't that big. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. At the end of the day, what's left for the people who are actually performing this is small margins. And if you're starting to take points and points and points, then it either affects the person who's running the business or the bettor gets shafted. And if you shaft the bettor, you're in trouble.
Because right now, and we used to see this, you see it in sort of the fantasy universe, and there's people who use ESPN's fantasy product, and people who use Yahoo, and people who use CBS, and people stay with whoever owns is managing their league forever, right? And so it's going to be hard to change people's habits. If all of a sudden New Jersey is allowing sports betting and they're opening up a marketplace where you can bet digitally, the pricing better be really good to get people who are longtime bettors to leave what they're doing with Five Dimes or anybody or Pinnacle or anywhere else, which are some offshore sports books, in order to bet in New Jersey, because otherwise the ease of use is already established with the offshore books.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the same premise, which is create quality of product. Right. Obviously, the tax regime is relevant here, and that's part of the ongoing negotiation. There are other people more qualified to speak to than me on that front, but it seems to me there is a deal to be done, and there's some smart people doing it. I hope they get there. But the bit which we can control is quality of product. If you create quality of product, people will come and use that product instead of going elsewhere. I think that's readily achievable, but you have to do it in both phases. The first phase of the additive market, traditional market, make that a quality market based on quality inputs, quality operators running in the right way. And then the second phase, again, make that a fantastic experience for the consumer, which obviously that benefits everyone in the long term because it takes people away, puts them in the regulated market where the leagues benefit, the operators benefit, and commercial players and creators benefit as well.
The write-up for this session talked about gambling being a multi-billion-dollar market just about right off the bat. Is that pie in the sky or is that realistic?
Off the bat, like 2018?
Let's say within 5 years.
Well, God, those are so different, right? Like 2018, I think it's pie in the sky. 5 years, I think it's entirely reasonable.
What are some of the pitfalls that would keep us from getting to that?
I think it's a lot of what Matt was just talking about and what John is talking about, like the quality of the product and not alienating the people who are the bettors, I think is going to be paramount. And then it becomes sort of, sausage making. Who's going to legalize? How quickly are they going to legalize? Will it become legal federally? Will Congress step in and create sort of a national market? I think those are sort of, when I think about it.
They're the two obvious ones for me. The first is obviously what is happening from a legal point of view, legislatively, regulatory. What's that going to look like? How's that going to hold it up? I think everyone is aware of that. Certainly people watching this will have an awareness of that. And then the second one is, to my point before, how do you create a market, a value chain, which creates an innovative environment? Now, I personally, and I think this is a view of most people who've been looking at it as well, I think there is a basis where quality content, official content, can be used and distributed to market in a way which allows a multiplicity of products and integrated services to emerge. And I think that's the key thing from this panel. Let's get to that point where that is coming to fruition, where you're moving away from more of a traditional model of here's some betting content going into a service being provided to an operator. Let's take a step back, use a blank sheet of paper and say, create quality data and editorial and video content, offer it out to the market, see what the market will do with it, create products and services which everyone will benefit from. So the pitfalls for me are those two. One, from a legal point of view, and two, not being broad in the application of opening up the market for innovative product creators.
I think we're way underestimating what's. I can't tell you if it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. 5 to 10 years from now, if sitting on this panel, oh my God, you're looking back, you'll say, what were we thinking? Like, if we don't screw it up, I mean, there's a possibility we could screw it up. But assuming we don't screw it up, we hire and have smart, creative people doing the type of programming and integrations that we're talking about. You know, I remember when Atlantic City opened up, you know, everybody's saying Vegas is going to die, right? Vegas didn't die. Atlantic City almost died, but Vegas didn't die. Even though a couple
You said you weren't going to get political.
Back. And then, all of a sudden, you can't fly into an airport anywhere in the States now and not be an hour away from a casino. People love to gamble, period. And that's slots and table games. Now, mix that excitement with sports passion and do it effectively. Oh my God, forget about it.
We talk about this in the office. I say I, and only because this is the most pessimistic thing I will ever say, because I am generally optimistic with blinders. But John sort of raised the point, which is we all have a great opportunity to fuck up a great opportunity. Like, it can be amazing and it can be huge, and I think the biggest obstacles are always going to be sort of all of us not doing the right things or not making the right decisions, and the market itself sort of people getting greedy about what their piece of it is going to be.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is about FanDuel and DraftKings, who grew and they were huge and they were popular and they appeared to fuck up a great opportunity. What were the lessons learned from that a couple years ago?
So, you know, I think the lessons were about the messaging, about, you know, here's how you win big. And I think that if you're framing it as something that is only about a new form of lottery, then you're going to turn off an audience that doesn't really know what it is, because they'll come in once and not have that experience. And if the volume is incredibly loud and that's the message, then you don't sustain people, and you're not bringing people in who want to sort of be there on an everyday basis. I actually don't think if the volume is the same, but the message is, here's something of value that can make you better at something and make you more interested in something, that's a more palatable way to present it.
Agreed entirely. I think what it highlights is the need to be very, very aware that the customer, the consumer, is your focus. And creating an environment and a product and a service which is fun and enjoyable is the aspiration. It's readily achievable, which in a regulated environment, I think some of the things that happened previously wouldn't be able to happen. It was exactly that loophole which created the situation and arguably accelerated us to the point we're at now. But I think Chad's right. I think the focus of the product and the way that product is marketed would be slightly different now than was done so at the time.
It was a mess. It was a mess. They just got caught up in this big land grab mess, and they didn't, you know, it was kind of like trying to get elected as a president, you know, like you just say whatever you have to say. And you know, they were spending enormous amounts of money. I can't, like advertising. You couldn't go into any venue, any airport, any TV sports offering and not see the two of them going after it. It was like 200, 300, 400, 500. Their acquisition costs were through the roof. So, but the real problem, I think the real problem is, I think what you mentioned, they lost their focus. And the focus was, you can't screw the customer. You can't do that. You can't say that this is a fair, when I say fair game, I mean anybody can win, and not anybody could win. The only people that were winning that game were pros, for sure. The statistics bore it out. And you had, you know, how many times are people going to put up $10, $20, $50 and not even get a sniff? You know, so I think that was the big problem. I think they just got so ahead of themselves in terms of, and then the market, of course, boosted it and pumped it up. And I think that was the big problem. Now they may bail out. It looks like they're bailing out because, you know, there's this study that just came out about the crossover of people who play fantasy sports or have a high propensity for gaming, and that
shocker.
And you know, and that could be good. You know, that could be good news for them. And you know, so they start again, and then they come into this space. But I certainly, You just got to be open and honest with the end user, with the customer, and give them a fair game. And if they're going to win, they're going to win. If they're going to lose, they're going to lose. But at least they don't have delusions of what's really happening.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I would add to that as a slightly secondary point that it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that what particularly those two organisations were able to do, not as their first priority, but as a result, was create a very sensible debate around what betting in the United States was, what it could be, how it should be regarded, and the extent to which people would engage with it. I mean, the popularity of those games demonstrated what we all know, which is that people want to be involved in that space. The secondary challenge is to make that space a safe one, a secure one, and one where the consumer is protected, and as a result can have a fun experience in a way which is safe and secure. There's a lot of talk at the moment about integrity of this space. It's not the subject of this panel, but just very briefly on that, it's actually pretty straightforward as far as we're concerned at Perform, where we do a lot of operation in this space with a lot of rights holders. It's a very straightforward piece. If you're involved in the betting space, you're automatically involved in the integrity space because you have a responsibility in that environment to be a contributor. You can very readily build an ecosystem whereby people who are anywhere from content creators such as us to product and consumer facing like these guys, leagues, regulators can work together in an environment where everyone is sharing information, sharing data, working together to identify and correct, remedy integrity issues. That's very achievable. It's not a commercial part of this discussion. It's just an automatic that comes with it. And the consumer protection piece is part of that. That's what regulators will be looking at. So I wouldn't want that element to become a distraction. I think it's something worth committing resource and thought to. But I think getting to a positive outcome on there is actually something which is not easy, but there is a clear pathway to do it.
We couldn't hear the previous panel. I'm assuming they did talk about the integrity fee there. How does that all end up? What's your best guess?
My best guess is that you got a better shot of it. First of all, the first question is how much of an issue is it today in professional sports or not? That's number one, and I'm certainly not qualified to answer that. But you certainly got a better shot of it being not an issue when things are open, legal, regulated. Everybody knows what's going on as compared to sort of gray market gaming and gambling, and nobody knows where the money's going, and nobody knows who's in charge and all this sort of stuff. So assuming there was an issue, you got a better shot at in making sure there's integrity within sports by doing what we're doing. I think the old argument about, that we used to hear, well, we can't let sports gaming come into, allow it because it'll hurt the integrity of the sport. Excuse me? There's billions of dollars being bet right today. How do you know it's not influencing the sport as it's occurring? Better to regulate it and make sure that things aren't happening. So if it was an issue, I don't think it's an issue in the forward. And it's in, as you were saying, it's in all of our best interests to make sure that we're clean, none of this happens, and that it's a fair game for the consumer.
I think there is a more pragmatic conversation around actual integrity fees, which is, it goes back to what we were talking about before. How are people going to make money? Like, how are the bookmakers going to make money? How are they going to translate that pricing to consumers? Because if they are on the hook for paying taxes to the state, if they're on the hook for paying integrity fees to the league, there's no way that they can create a system where they can make any money and it's worthwhile for them to be in business at all. And that then the consumers who are betting and might be more inclined to bet with the states are not going to leave their current platforms. So the integrity fee, like a lot of the leagues talk about it, and it's the hot button topic, but it's actually sort of pivotal. Like, where it ends up has a huge impact on the growth of the business and how many people want to get into the business, and if it remains a state-by-state thing. I think the amount of that integrity fee has a huge impact on what the overall growth of the business can be.
I think the other thing that the panel previously would have been talking about was around this concept of official data, which again is a very fundamental element of the debate which is ongoing and the negotiation ongoing between the leagues and the operators. And the thing I would add to that is at the heart of that debate is the premise here around quality of content that is powering markets, both the traditional market and the new wave of market that is going to come. And that is fundamental to all of this. If we're going to create this environment, it has to be quality content being created, which is going to power it. Be that official data or not, that's part of a discussion for other people and negotiation for others to figure out. But the pathway is clear, and it starts with that. Create the right content at the start, and you will create an environment where we can get to this phase that we've talked about, where the likes of Action Network, Score, Perform, and the rest of our clients and customers are able to create fantastic, engaging products for consumers and make a really, really positive betting market in the US.
Okay, we spent 40 minutes talking about gambling. Before we go, I'm going to go down here. Your 1 5-star surefire pick that's going to happen in the next 6 months. What should I go home and gamble on?
Oh my God.
Oh gosh, what is June? It's a tough one, John. Let me think for a second.
When you do this every day, Chad.
Well, I'm trying to think, is it sports related?
Yeah, but he puts it behind a paywall, so you got to pay him.
Exactly.
He'll tease you with.
I'll give you the first 50 words. If you want the answer.
He's already figured out how to make money in this stuff.
Exactly. Let's see. I would say that I believe LeBron James will not sign with the Lakers.
I can't believe you said that.
There you go. It's on to you.
Yeah.
Good question. I'll try and come up with a US-centric piece here. It's not the next 6 months. San Diego Padres, 2021 World Series champions.
Why do you choose that one?
That's my team.
Oh, there you go. Totally makes sense, by the way.
I was certain you were going to say England for the World Cup, so nice one.
I'm not going near that.
All right.
You've had all this time.
You can't make a worse bet than me.
Okay, I'm trying to generate some business here. I can't believe that with the U.S. allowing sports gaming to be legal, that it won't be legal within Canada within the next 12 months.
12 months. There you have it. Thank you very much. That was a fantastic panel.